what I've seen working in the hospital is that I really don't think that it has affected this patient population more than anything else. I do think that when patients get it, they can become a lot more ill. Our McClendon labs here at the hospital, they do all of the laboratory microbiological testing for the medical center, for UNC's Hillsborough campus, for all kinds of outpatient clinics. I think maybe Chatham Hospital in Siler City and some other sites. Out of all of the thousands and thousands of tests that they have run this cold and flu season, they have had 0 positive for influenza. So if, we have this much effectiveness with people not getting influenza, and at least locally from, implementing the kind of measures that we've already been doing, I really think that goes to show how much, just kind of maintaining this level of awareness, if it was before COVID times or hopefully in the future, sort of just how far this sort of thing can go. Let's see. Fungi common in CF patients. Really the big one is Aspergillus. There's Aspergillus fumigatus, Terreus, and flavus, and these really increase in prevalence with age. As patients are older, they're more likely to have Aspergillus. You have ABPA, which is allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis, and this can cause allergy problems and wheezing. It can also cause some severe problems after transplant. And this is something that, again, it comes from the environment. It's not spread between people. So this is something you would find from soil in areas that have really high humidity, maybe kind of damp areas, things like that. So what we always like to stress to everybody, number one way to prevent infection is hand hygiene. When I'm teaching new employee orientation, one of the things I like to say to people is if you're ever doing something and wondering if you should be washing your hands, the answer is probably yes. It is so important to wash your hands, and it's also sort of the quality of the hand washing and the length of time. So making sure you're doing hand hygiene before and after eating, when you get home, after using the restroom, after coming into contact with respiratory secretions, maybe coughing into your hands, handling tissues, before and after cleaning nebulizer equipment, before and after catheter care, entering and exiting a clinic room or hospital space. So as far as preventing infections at home, I really tried to be pretty mindful, at least in my limited experience just in the inpatient world, to try to touch on things that I think are important to remember at home. The really big one is cleaning and disinfecting equipment, especially nebulizer equipment, because there's so many spots. The NeilMed sinus rinse bottle, that's actually something I learned about from patients I took care of and started using. It's very important to use distilled or sterile water in those, or water that has been boiled and is cool. Most of the time, tap water is not going to affect us, but on the off chance that there could be maybe some kind of pathogen in it, like an amoeba, very extreme cases, I don't think we've ever really seen it locally. There's something called Naegleria fowleri that can cause pretty nasty infections. So it's really important to making sure you're cleaning, not only cleaning the device, but using clean water in the device. Even if it's not something like this Naegleria organism, depending what's maybe in the sinks, I don't know how often people sort of take maybe the little aerator off their kitchen sink and take it out and clean it, but they're usually pretty gross. Monitoring devices for signs of infections, a port, some other sort of central line, a Mickey button, of course, immunizations, everyone's personal choice to make, not sharing personal items, and then also avoiding frequent contact with dust, soil. One thing that I thought was also important to touch on are infusions. I think that for a lot of families, unfortunately, they get to be so commonplace that sometimes maybe people are just really sort of in the routine and maybe just kind of skip steps. And it's really important to take the time to do every component to keep things as clean as possible. This is actually, as far as a lot of what we do in the inpatient setting, is a lot of work to help prevent central line associated bloodstream infections. So if you're at home, making sure you're starting out in a clean work area, performing hand hygiene before you're accessing the line or performing any care, using all the components of the dressing change kit. They're all in there for a reason, so should make sure to use all of them to help change the dressing. Cleaning the injection cap or clave, sort of the end of the line where you would hook on a flush. We like to call it scrubbing the hub, making sure you're doing it every time. If you had to flush with saline, give an antibiotic, do saline and heparin, making sure you're cleaning in between every single time. Keeping dressings intact and dry. Also making sure you're flushing all the lumens of the line as directed by your provider. When these lines can get sort of biofilm formation on them that makes them more susceptible to getting infected. So if the biofilm sort of builds up, it's kind of like food for bacteria to feed off of on that line. And also if the line becomes occluded, then that can also be a way that that area can get infected. It's also important if there's more than one sort of lumen or piece of the line, like some PICC lines can have what we call, it's a double lumen, and it has two, like you could hook up two infusions at one time, making sure that those are being flushed as well. And really making sure it's important to report problems to your provider if the catheter is hard to flush or it won't flush at all. Any pain, redness, swelling, or drainage around the catheter site. Because those are all signs that there could be an infection, and we want to sort of get to those early and not let them get severe. So preventing infections at home with respect to C. difficile. As I said earlier, because C. difficile spreads by spores, hands have to be washed with soap and water. Alcohol-based hand rubs do not work to kill C. diff spores. If you have ever had a family member with CF hospitalized and they have had C. difficile, you've probably seen the staff doing soap and water hand hygiene. Things have to be cleaned with bleach. A lot of sort of standard cleaners we would call like quaternary ammonias, things like Lysol. They're not going to kill the C. diff spores, and C. diff spores can actually live for several months on surfaces. If at all possible, having that person use maybe a separate bathroom just to minimize any transmission to any other members of the family. And then just some sort of more general things. If your child is a person that has CF-related diabetes, making sure that they're managing their blood glucose. Airway glucose can promote bacterial lung infections. Having hyperglycemia for longer periods of time makes patients more susceptible to getting other types of infections. Also really tracking their nutritional status and BMI, because more energy is needed to fight the lung infections. So making sure that, they're eating enough calories, maybe especially if you have an older child that's going to college. It's just really important to, sort of make sure that they're staying with their routine. A lot of times when we see patients going to college, they're independent and they think, well, I'm doing well, I can, skip doing X, Y, Z today, and maybe they skip it a little more often. So it is really important just to sort of maintain and really do the care that they're supposed to do. As far as preventing infections in healthcare settings, if you're going to CF clinic, for example, making sure to maintain a 6-foot distance from other CF patients. wearing a mask if outside of the clinic room or the hospital room. And also reminding staff to perform preventive measures if necessary. These can be verbal or nonverbal cues. Maybe if you see someone come in the room and I don't know, maybe they're going to flush your child's line, but they don't wash their hands first. It can just be easy. We like to say when we're in the hospital, we do hand hygiene observations. We just like to say, don't forget to wash your hands. And it's just a really sort of effective way. It's not accusatory, just sort of being a reminder. And you can also use nonverbal cues. Maybe depending what's going on, asking someone, maybe you're seeing them about to do something like access a line and they're not wearing gloves, maybe saying, oh, well, can I grab some gloves for you? Or can I grab a mask for you? Or maybe just, sort of handing them one, things like that. In the inpatient setting specifically, of course, I just discussed some, central line care with home infusions. Also keeping respiratory therapy devices clean. Respiratory therapy will, of course, help with this. At UNC, I know we change everything out every 24 hours and it will get rinsed and cleaned appropriately in the meantime. If you do have equipment in your room, making sure that it is drying at least 3 feet from the sink. There have been instances, not specifically that we've seen with nebulizer equipment, with other things, items stored too close is something a lot of hospitals have actually started to pay more attention to. There's a group of resistant bacteria, we would call it CRE, carbapenem resistant Enterobacteriaceae. This isn't really something that we see in persons with CF. These are usually gut bacteria that are resistant. We see this a lot in people that have a lot of healthcare exposures, very severe chronic health issues, and a lot of, I think we really associated a lot also with very, very long hospitalizations and stays in nursing homes and things like that. But there have been some hospitals where those organisms have been recovered from the sinks. And when people turn on the water going into the sinks just splashes up, and those droplets can get on items around the sink. So making sure if things are drying nearby, moving them at least 3 feet away. Then also isolation precautions. If you're coming to visit your child, let's say that they did have C. difficile, making sure that, I definitely know how uncomfortable it is to wear PPE, having done it in pretty much every patient's room for 5 years. Making sure you're adhering to that, wearing a gown or gloves if indicated, washing with soap and water for hand hygiene, things like that, to not only, help prevent spread to possibly yourself or other family members, but also outside the room. I've seen people, unfortunately, waltz outside of a patient's room on enteric precautions, go right into the mini fridge, use the water dispenser, not wash hands, things like that. So it's really kind of doing a disservice to everyone and important to help keep things clean. It's also why we try to clean a lot of those kind of shared and common items a lot. Preventing infections at school. Of course, in an ideal world, everyone washes their hands, everyone covers their coughs, everyone is vaccinated. That obviously is the ideal case. I know that, at least it's my understanding, I don't know if Ellen, maybe you would probably have more insight into this, but I think a lot of times if schools have one student with CF, especially if they're not siblings, my understanding that they try to sort of make accommodations to make sure that those students are maybe like put in different classes and things like that at school to prevent any kind of transmission.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we definitely recommend as well. When any of our patients are starting school, we are able to help provide them with information for the principal, for the teacher, for the students, for everybody, along with a letter that can help them create a 504 plan. And we absolutely always recommend and make people aware, because as you said earlier, they may not be aware that that distance between two kiddos with CF is really important. So, yeah, absolutely.
And then sort of last, just to sort of quickly touch on sort of how to talk to family and friends about this. I think one thing that we maybe kind of take sometimes is, when we get questioned by family, maybe extended family members and friends, well, why do I have to be careful around both of your children if only one of them has CF? Or, not understanding why it's important. A lot of times it is just a matter of persons just simply just not being educated. I have been really surprised so far in my career of how many people either haven't heard of CF, they don't really know anything about it. Even if they do, I've heard from patients who have been transplanted that they've had, friends or family say, oh, well, you got new lungs, so you're cured. So, you don't have to do all this stuff anymore. And unfortunately, that's not the case. And so a lot of times it is really important to assess that person's level of understanding and then, try to educate them. It's also just really important what you say to them and sort of how you say it. We have definitely learned a lot in the past year because of COVID-19, sort of reminding people masks, things like that, washing their hands, even things that I think probably for all of us are pretty basic. But, just some suggestions that we came up with, like all the information we have right now says wearing a face mask is the best way to keep yourself and others safe. Would you be willing to put on your mask or pull it up over your nose? Or germs that might not make us or the sibling sick can really affect the person with CF lungs. So being cautious by washing your hands or staying home when you're sick can help keep all of us healthy. Because when they're being cautious around everyone, it's really sort of just a bonus for everybody and not really just singling out that person specifically. I think that is all that I have for you all. I think that was kind of long. But are there any questions I can try my best to answer for all of you? If not, I will certainly try to get you answers.
I had a question kind of in light of COVID now and the getting back to school and things like that. What are your thoughts about masks and distance? And if people are masked, how important is still the 6 feet? Maybe depending on how enclosed the space is or things like that, because that's a hard one for young people.
Yes.
Yeah.
What we have learned most recently, I think that this study was put out by some providers at Duke. They looked at, I think it was a total of 90,000 students across 11 school districts. And I think out of all of those 90,000 students, I want to say they had 32 confirmed cases of COVID-19 that were definitely linked to school. They have observed okay mask compliance in students. I want to say middle and high school students, they found around 40 to 60%. Because I know that it is hard to maintain that distance in the school setting. It's why masking is really so important. It's kind of odd. We've just really seen that for some reason, younger children aren't really spreading COVID, which is kind of different to what we sort of all know about younger children, that they kind of always spread colds and things like that. I think they also looked at, sorry, I'm just trying to look at some of my notes here because the speaker just came to talk to us the other day. Looks like they also looked at a lot with 54 YMCA camps in North Carolina from March to August last year. And there were 19 cases of COVID-19, but there were also only 2 cases where they had found transmission occurring at the camp to other campers or to the counselors. I think with knowing the effectiveness of 95% reduction in transmission, if both persons are wearing a mask, I think that really that with hand hygiene is really going to be the most important thing. My mother-in-law teaches preschool. She knows how hard it is since she's at a private school. They've been back in for, I guess, since September. She knows how hard it is, especially for smaller kids, to keep their masks on. But I don't think, anecdotally that they've had any, they definitely haven't had any transmission. I know they've had a few exposures. But based on what we've seen so far, it looks like masking is really sort of the big thing for preventing transmissions in school too.
I just have one quick question, and this is in relation to the Gator style masks, which I seem to see a lot more of lately. And I know, or I'm thinking it's because a lot of people are just happy that people are wearing any mask that they can. However, I do think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that Gators are not a high quality mask.
That's what my understanding is, especially when we have like the cloth masks, or especially even the Gators, because the Gators are really lightweight. I feel like a lot of them are kind of made of, I don't know what that kind of material is called. I feel like it's used for like athletic clothing a lot. It's kind of like a really thin material that doesn't really provide as much filtration. Of course, something is always better than nothing, and it certainly provides more sort of downward protection, if that makes sense. But we have, I think, definitely seen sort of reduced efficacy from the neck Gators as opposed to a more traditional face mask itself.
Is there like a great list of brands of cleaning supplies that we can use for our homes to clean without worrying that our kids gonna inhale and it's gonna cause any issues to them?
Oh, that's a good one. I can't say for sure about specific brands. I know that, like you said, a lot of the cleaning materials with the disinfecting agents that are in them and some of the scents can definitely trigger some breathing problems. I know it bothers my mom a lot. I can ask and try to find out more that can be shared with you, maybe some things that are going to be kind of lower odor. I know that you have to look for items at the store that are going to be cleaning items specifically, but I think hydrogen peroxide items, I think Lysol makes a product that is something that's going to be kind of lower odor. You can't just really buy a bottle of hydrogen peroxide in the like at CVS or something like that, like the kind you'd use for first aid or something, because that's going to be a lower concentration. But I know that hydrogen peroxide is something we use in the hospital that is a lower odor for sure. I do think it is important, especially though, if you are concerned about the irritation that some of those scents can cause, to be mindful of some of the kind of natural cleaning products. We have definitely seen in studies that some of the cleaning products that are made just exclusively with like essential oils, that those are not as effective at killing bacteria as things we know like quaternary ammoniums that are in things like Lysol, or bleach that are in things like Clorox. Trying to think. I could try to find some more specific resources and share with you all. We're very fortunate working at UNC to have so many resources, and one of our former department directors is an internationally known expert in disinfection and sterilization. So I think he should have some very good recommendations for me to be able to share with you.
Yes, please. That would be great if we can have a list.
And I can post it on the website too, just when I post the slides and the video. There's a question in the chat saying, can you look into the efficacy of Norwex supplies as well?
I am not familiar with those, but I can look into it, see what is the sort of primary disinfectant in those, and see what kind of research there is for it and share it with you all.
Okay, that would be great.
Natalie, to go back to the hospital setting and the inpatient side, what sort of protocol, like, I know when we've been in the past, we were just concerned walking into this room and it just seems like there's so many surfaces and areas and you just think, oh my God, every one of them is just full of stuff. When it turns over, who goes in and what do they do to the room to make it clean?
So there are actually some pretty specific checklists of things that nursing are responsible for cleaning, like IV pumps, and things that environmental services are responsible for cleaning. So they clean pretty much, well, not pretty much, they clean everything in the room, but especially focusing on high touch surfaces. So things like call bells, bed rails, door handles, things like that. And we actually have something that's called glow germ that glows in the dark. And the environmental services managers will actually try to get into a room before, after the patient's left and before someone comes to clean it. And they will usually kind of dot 10 places in the room. And then after it's cleaned, they come back with a black light and they check to make sure that the room has been cleaned adequately. I want to say that they have been reporting somewhere between 95 and 98% I guess adherence to cleaning all of those spots. We also have something we'll use sometimes, especially if a patient has C. difficile, called a Trudy machine. It kind of looks like R2D2, but it looks, it's a big machine that they'll roll into the room, and it actually uses UV light to disinfect everything in the room. Leaves kind of a funny smell afterwards, but those have been incredibly effective at, like to say, kind of baking the inside of the room. But even just the sort of daily cleaning that occurs in the rooms, the bactericidal and virucidal items that the environmental health staff use to clean in the rooms are, of course, EPA registered hospital grade disinfectants. They do things such as checking the concentration of like their the solution that they have to dilute for mopping the patient rooms has to be checked every day. The sort of mop heads themselves get changed in between every patient room. So there's actually a lot more than I think I realized or appreciated that goes into their work that I'm now familiar with and now know. But they are, they have a long list of things that get done in each of those rooms, either day to day or after a patient is discharged.
That sounds good. I guess if someone would have told us that maybe going in, that would have helped relieve our stress, but no.
Well, and I think if you want, and it's not something patients or their families would ask for super often, but I'm sure the staff would definitely give you. We have the big canisters of wipes. We usually call them purple wipes or super Sani cloths. I mean, we've definitely had patients just say, you know, hey, can I keep some of those in my room? Because also a lot of times there's so much equipment in the room, right? There's the IV pump and pull, there's the vest machine, there might be, depending what's going on with your child, maybe a kangaroo pump for tube feeding. So there's a lot of things in that room. So I know that the staff would certainly be happy to give you a canister of those if you wanted to keep them in the room.
Yeah, that'd be nice too. I know we've wiped everything down again with like a Lysol wipes and stuff like that, but yeah, that'd be good. Are there, you mentioned this, the TrueD with the UV, are there any similar things? I don't know if we all want to go this path, but you know, to use at home, that's maybe a bit of a
I know that definitely in the past year, there have been a lot more sort of consumer grade products with UV light disinfection. I feel like you see them a lot. I think there's one that's really popular called phone soap. It's like a little case you put your cell phone in that kind of bakes it. To be honest, I'm not the most familiar with how effective those are. I'm sure they're effective to some degree, but I also think, you know, cleaning your phone or other devices with like alcohol wipes, for example, you know, is going to be something just as effective. I think there's also been some question as to, you know, using those things longer term, maybe on something like a cell phone, if that would maybe damage it or something like that. I'm not sure. I do think there are some schools that have purchased these UV lights for classrooms, but I don't know if it's sort of the same degree of light intensity or the amount of time that it gets used in the room. I'm not sure if it's as effective as something we would use in the hospital. And I'm pretty certain that, you know, a lot of schools and whatnot would not be using the same machineries because I do know, unfortunately, that those are incredibly expensive. So
I know in another country for sure in the hospital they even using UV lights. That's what we were thinking to purchase for our new home, just like to have for one bedroom to turn it on while we're not there to clean it up. But there is like a lot scams right now in the internet about UV lights and so a mask and everything that people are just trying to sell and scam people with non-really effective products. So that's just another question. If there is like a medical website where you can order the proper one for your house to have, especially like we have CF kids and we want to make sure the most germs are killed. So is there a website that we can trust and order?
I can definitely look into that. You're certainly right about, you know, a lot of ineffective products being sold. I know we had Homeland Security at the hospital a few weeks ago, making sure that we didn't receive counterfeit N95 masks from a supplier, which we did not. But there are a lot of products that have kind of been put out very quickly, especially in the past year, that are maybe subpar or don't meet standards that we would have, or, you know, just don't meet standards that we have for, you know, I'm not sure if it's FDA or whom exactly sort of regulates those things, but I can, sorry, I've got a lot of things to look into for you guys, but I think I should be able to find a lot of answers for you all. And Mark, I see your other question about the other products there, the silver antimicrobial cloths. So I can look into those too.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm going to copy and paste Mark's questions. That way I can make sure I don't miss them.
Sure. Thank you so much, Natalie. I didn't mean to cut you off for your presentation, but after. So we really appreciate your time, and I will post the video, which I did start late, but I will post that. And then if it's possible for you to send me the slides, then I could post that because I missed the first couple slides before the COVID ones. But I'll post that on the website. Are you going to say?
I will try to get some answers to the questions you all had here within the next few days. And Jennifer, I can send that to you.
That would be great. And then I'll add those and I can post those as well.